A special welcome to everyone. Good night. Welcome to this edition of A Divided Nation. That's our subject for tonight. And we want to give special thanks to Globespan and Nohar and his team for allowing us the opportunity to discuss these very critical issues that affect all of us in Guyana and makes us all ache in the diaspora. This is a privately funded platform, and we would certainly appreciate your donation. Your donation is what keeps this this program going. So I think the website is up somewhere. Devin will put it up, but you can click on that link or go on that website and make a contribution towards keeping these conversations going. Well, like I said, tonight we will be talking about a divided nation. How do we fix it? Some people believe we're not divided. Some people believe that this is Guyana. This is how we are constructed, and this is how we need to deal with it. Some believe that we are divided, and this has been the case for 60 years. How do we go about fixing it? How do we have a commitment? Is there a will to fix it? These are some of the questions we want to ask our guests tonight as we unravel the current issues on the ground in Guyana and give a historical and perspective on it and where we go from here. Because I think history collided on the streets of Guyana, 2 weeks ago. And here we are, and we are all hoping that this collision does not happen again. And we've definitely got to maybe fix it, or some might believe we don't have a problem. We'll figure out. We'll see how that goes during this show. But tonight, my guests are no stranger to many of you. Timothy Jonas, almost a regular fixture now on Globespan, and we have. I was told that we bring you on because of ratings. Whenever you're on, our numbers skyrocket, Jonas. I don't know why, but that happens to be the case, right? And we have former President Donald Ramotar with us, who will share his experience at all levels. Being part of an executive of the PPP, as well as President of Guyana, and who might have first-hand knowledge and experience on these issues. And of course, we have James McAllister, a former executive. I'm not too sure if he still is, of the People's National Congress, who resides in New Jersey, USA. So welcome, guests, and I look forward for a very engaging discussion tonight. Well, let me start off with you, Timothy. Of course, we've had the murder of the Henry cousins. They are our brothers, of course, and we've had the murder of Harish Singh. And this has all come on the heels of an election, a protracted recount, and a weary and tiring wait for a new government. And then, and so much happened that added up to what might have or might not have resulted in what we experienced with it over the last 2 weeks. And we don't want to go through the details again. I think everyone knows the details. But I know on one of your previous show, you mentioned that the murders were a raw racial hatred. You believe that was the motive of the murders. Can you explain yourself?
I didn't say raw racial hatred. What I said is that it didn't have anything to do with coconuts. There's something that I feel about Guyanese, and I like the panel you have.
From what you said, so you can go back to the video. Raw racial hatred,
We have been in a time like that. I'm glad you have this panel here, because there's I think this is a panel that can discuss this objectively and hopefully express disagreement with a suggestion I want to make. Us Guyanese, in a way, we're new to the game we see played in the rest of the world, the Latinos, the mafioso, and the gangs. We have crimes of passion. We get vexed. And in a fit of rage and a crime of passion, we chop somebody, we beat our wife, we kill somebody, but it's done in the heat of the moment, in a crime of passion. We are not cold-blooded, premeditated killers. It's something that doesn't happen often with us. Speaking for myself, I am struggling to find an occasion in Guyana where someone was killed in cold, premeditated passion, in the horrific way that it was done with these 2 years. And it is that premeditation that makes me call this a hate crime, whether it is this.
It doesn't sound coming from someone's mic.
No one knows.
Is it yours, Jonas?
No, I don't have any other instruments here.
You're hearing like a thing.
Probably my fan, but the plate is hot, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but coming back to the question, Jonas, do you believe that there were a racial element to the murders?
We don't know, but I do believe it was premeditated, and I do believe that for that reason, you got to look beyond what we as Guyanese. Nature of premeditation is not something we do. I would like to hear Mr. Ramatar's and Mark's response.
Correct.
And see if they agree with that. If this is something that isn't foreign to us.
Well, I would like to definitely take of both our guests, starting with Ramatar, Donald. Do you believe that the murder of the 3 individuals in West Berbice were a result of any kind of racial hatred or racial incitement?
It's not impossible, but to me it's very unlikely because I don't see any condition that would have led up to such an action. But at the moment, I think we're right in the middle of speculation because there is up to as we speak now, at this point in time, there is no clarity on one, motives, and 2, how the person died. Even where they died is not known because the police has recently made a statement that where the bodies were found, it was not where the murder actually took place. That's what the police said in a definitive type of way. So I don't know. I think the safest thing to do is for us to wait for a proper investigation to go on, for us to have a conclusive thing. But Timothy is right. The brutality of the killing, with what shocked people, the cutting of the throat, the Xing on the head, and so forth and so on. It was a very brutal. The killings of the 2 boys were very, very brutal, and that also raises questions about what, as far as I know, I mean, I'm giving my opinion here as a layman, and from what you read and what we saw here happen not so long ago, the type of killings that the way the guys were killed, the 2 boys, the 2 Henry cousins, the way they were killed suggests to me that type of killing, executional type of killing, cutting your throat like that is, and so on and so forth, and that can come from many, many different type of sources. But as I said, I don't think now is the time to speculate and throw unnecessary flames on these things, but for us to wait on some more investigation. I know, the police is working on the matter, and the government has been asking for help from the British government and from the CARICOM to come and help with the investigation. And I saw in the papers too that the human rights organization is asking the UN for some assistance in investigating this crime. So I think that it shouldn't be very long before we have a better picture of what actually took place.
And James, I want to bring you in. What's your take on whether the murders had any sort of racial connotation to them?
Well, like Donald said, we have to wait on facts, but we have to be careful. We do not dismiss what is a very possible scenario. Timothy made reference to the mutilation and of the bodies and so on. That points to hate. What is the basis of hate in Guyana? A lot of it is political, a lot of it is ethnic. It would be easy. It would be the easy thing for us to try to move away from this and not try to confront it as a society and say this exists here. And if it exists here, this is what we have to do. I noted the crime chief very early in the piece declaring that the murders were not politically motivated. He should immediately recuse himself from this investigation because he said that before he had the facts. And it would point right away to the police direction, the direction in which they want to move. Is we have to follow the evidence. What existed, what happened, what were the conditions of the bodies. Immediately we see the condition of the bodies, anywhere an investigator would say, this appears to be a hate crime. And they will move from there to speculate on other things and look past what is the obvious at the first glance is not doing service to the situation, is not doing service to society. If that is what happened, and if that kind of sentiment exists in the country, then as a society, we have to confront it. We have to deal with it rather than try to brush it aside.
And this brings me to another round of questions I want to ask all three of you. It seems to be that generally all three of you believe that the murders were or may not, at least before the investigation is done and before it's been made public, that it's not racial or ethnic or even political to that extent.
Just let me interject here. I think what you just said misrepresented what I said.
Well, you said not waiting an investigation to be completed.
Yes. Okay. What I'm saying is this. At face value, this appears to be a hate crime.
And when you say hate, you mean ethnic, racial hate crime?
Hate crime. A hate crime. And then we have to move forward to see what is the basis of hate that exists in Guyana. Okay?
That's the speculation that I mentioned just now. It's going towards speculation because I could also say very clearly that the method of the killing of the two youths also resembles, and I don't want to go in that direction. I said it looked like an execution type of killing, reminiscent of how drug people, Timothy mentioned about Latinos and so forth, how drug people do their job. But I don't think we should be going in that direction since an investigation is going on.
So
but to James to be speculating that it's a hate crime, and for me to be speculating for me to answer that to say, well, it looks to me it could also be. It has the elements of hate. It has the elements of executions type of killing. But where will that get us? Mm-hmm. So I think we should move beyond that because right now we don't know, and an investigation is going on, and I think we should wait on the investigation.
And we certainly don't know. We certainly don't know the motive conclusively. We certainly don't know what will come out of it. But what we do know that after the killing happened, especially when the Henry cousins were murdered, it spilled onto the streets, and it led to a conflict that was ethnic, that was racial in from all angle and in all flavor. So while the three of you are still waiting on investigation, the people of Guyana decided already that this was ethnic, and it took to the streets. How do you explain the racial or ethnic response to the killing of the Henry brothers? And I want to start with you, Jonas. How do you explain the killing of the Henry cousins? That it may or may not be racial, yet the conflict, the ethnic conflict that we've had for 60 years, decided to raise its ugly head on the roads of West Berbice.
Why do you assume that a protest is always logical? We've had a perfect storm. We've had a remarkably acrimonious election with increasing tensions on both sides. Unfortunately, in our country, the acrimonious elections is always based on a conflict between two ethnic-based parties. And immediately upon the outcome of that election, where half of the country is triumphant and the other half is traumatized, we had a situation where two Afro-Guyanese youngsters were found in the Baghdam in Cotton Tree.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's logical or not to jump to the conclusions that Donald is asking us not to jump to, and he's correct. Let's jump to conclusions we don't know. And James is also correct that we mustn't pretend things don't exist if they exist. But I disagree with James that the crime chief should recuse himself. We don't know what the crime chief knows and what he doesn't know. So I agree, let him do his work. But we don't know if he's in a position to say, yes, it was political, no, it was political, what evidence he has. Yeah. So I would leave that alone as well. When you don't know, you don't know. And right now we are all speculating, and Donald is right. It is dangerous to speculate because we are on it in the box, we are on it in the keg, and we saw what happened. Yeah. People jumped to conclusions, and the result was an escalation of the tension that we are all aware of, and that all of us, I'm sure, want not just to keep dampened, but to get rid of. All of us want to remove that tension. And I think that's what the discussion has to be about. How do we resolve the 60-year-old problem that we have?
Donald, so why, if you believe it was not ethnic and you believe it was not racial, where two Afro-Guyanese young men were killed, why did the Afro-Guyanese themselves take to the streets, demand justice, demanded that Guyanese Black Lives Matter also? And then it also took a racial tone in terms of blocking the streets and whose car got through and whose car didn't get through and whose cars got burnt and business and so on. So why did the people decide to make it an ethnic issue if you're not seeing it that way?
Well, because I think my own view on it, my own view on this thing, that this thing has a lot to do with the quality of leadership, particularly among the PNC supporters, who are fundamentally Afro-Guyanese supporters. They have not been given a education on the leadership towards national unity and towards building bridges. That's the historical fact, and it has continued. From the time the PPP split in 1955 to now, the PNC has been organizing on the basis of ethnicity. Fundamentally, too, particularly in these later times, if you look at the achievements of the PNC and government in the 28 years that they were in before, and if you look at the 5 years that they were in government, they cannot put their record against the PPP's record as far as achievements are concerned. Therefore, the only thing that they have in order to try, and they're not trying to make national appeals to, and therefore they continue to try to organize on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of race. That's one factor. The other factor, I strongly believe too, and I wrote an article about this some time ago, about our electoral system. I think our electoral system encourages organization to organizing on the basis of different type of things. Right, the moment ethnicity is a big issue that political parties sometimes want to organize around. And also you have religion. I heard of a Christian party was coming up the other day, and more of that will start to emerge, because our political electoral system was designed to create weak governments in Guyana. The only reason that did not happen was because when the British imposed PR on us, proportional representation on us, we were the only country in the Commonwealth with proportional representation. There were two reasons for that. One, the first reason was to get rid of Jagan and the PPP from government. And the second reason was to have weak government to keep Burnham dependent on a coalition with the GAR. But what happened? Burnham started to rig elections, and that never materialized. But look from 1992, since we have the return of democracy, and look at the mushrooming of political parties that we have within the country, and that keeps going on and on. We had about 3 political parties up to 1992, when elections were held in 92, and you have how much? You have 11 contesting the last election, and you have some registered, some 23 political parties. And that is a very dangerous thing for a country going forward. Why it's dangerous? I mean, this is slightly off your topic, but why it's dangerous? Because right now our country is becoming a big destination for, we find oil, we got a lot of investment coming in from abroad, and any big company can very easily create conditions where you have weak governments in parliament, where they can probably buy a seat or 2 in the parliament. And there you go, they're controlling our situation.
Yeah, I would love to get James' take on the same question, but just to remind you that there were ethnic conflicts for the last 60 years with or without big companies. So buying seats and
you missed my point. You missed my point.
But James, what's your take on that? Why did?
No, but let me make this point, because
those communities that were specifically affected, why did it take a very racial, ethnic sort of approach towards seeking their justice?
Well, Donald might want to sweep this thing aside and say that. I say you might want to. Okay? To sweep this thing aside and say that, look, it's not ethnic. Let's wait on the facts. That is how we generally sweep things under the carpet. The people believe it was ethnic, and it will be the responsibility of the government to move forward and the police to move forward with an appropriate investigation without preempting. Okay? And so that's what we saw emerge out again. And it has its roots in our history. And we have to accept this. And we shouldn't be trying to sweep it aside. Now, for instance, in response to this question, Donald's position was that this points to weak leadership in the PNC.
Not weak.
Okay, hold a minute. I listened to you. Weak leadership in the PNC. Now, what that has to do with leadership in the PNC? I can point to a recent situation of the stoning of the school buses in Berbice. Okay, then we did not hear a single PPP leader condemn that stoning of that attack on school children. Okay, why? Because at the point in time, it suited their purpose to have that kind of atmosphere in the country. Is it what happened to Henry Cousins? Is it political? Would it be connected to the kind of tension and things that were allowed to happen? The storming of the GCOM office, the chasing of the policemen out of villages, the stoning of school buses. Those things also points to weak leadership, and therefore, while we can say that the protest has no correlation between leadership in the PNC and how the people behave, the fact of the matter is that during a period we had a vacuum in terms of leadership in the PPP. Now, in response to this same question, Donald made an amazing leap to then talk about the PNC organizing on the basis of ethnicity. It is a contradiction. Here why it's a contradiction. If you look at the racial makeup of Guyana, okay, the ethnic group supposedly is a larger group than the ethnic group that supported mainly the PNC. It is in whose interest for there to be voting according to ethnicity? It's not in the PNC's interest. And from the day I joined the PNC back in the early 80s, I was always aware that the major focus, the major drive of the party was to create a multiracial movement.
But James, in all fairness to the reality in Guyana, the PNC is still viewed and may still be an Afro-based party. You know, I mean, when the Henry brothers were murdered, and rightfully so, Harmon and Mr. Granger were there, you know, in his next heartbeat, you know, and rightfully so. I mean, they represent, that's their constituent and so on. But saying that it's a multiracial party might not be the correct thing to say at this juncture. But I want to ask you a question that relates on this same subject.
But let me before you.
And while protests and expression of injustice should be something that we all agree on, do you believe that the blocking of the road and the and objects on the road and of course the harm to commuters and business and economy, do you think that was a legitimate protest?
Let me say first that in no protest anyone should be harmed. There should be no attempt to attack persons and to injure anyone. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I will say this to you, that a protest, for it to be effective, it must be disruptive. If the powers that be, your employers, whoever, are able to proceed with their business as usual, then you're wasting your time. If you go back to the early days of the trade union movement, when they had a picket line, the picket line was all about stopping people from going in, those who wanted to go in. Mm-hmm. And Donald would have supported those kinds of trade union action. And that's what it's all about. So if there is a if there's an issue that people need to have addressed, then people will then take the measures to bring attention to it and want to have the authorities deal with it. Very quickly, back in 1995, I worked for a very short stint with a construction company, and one morning I was asked to go with this big equipment, and I wasn't the driver, but I was there, and then the equipment was taken and it was parked in front of a government building and blocked the door. And the police was there when it happened. The guy came out, he took his keys, he locked the thing, and he left. Basically, it was a protest. And the effect of the protest that day is that this government office will not open until the issue is addressed. And that is what protest is about. People in Guyana would want to say to you, if you protest, get the police permission.
But the blocking of the roads did come with violence and did come with disruptions that created harm on fellow Guyanese, especially on the Indians.
I started by saying that no protest should bring harm to people and destruction of property.
Yeah.
But if I'm protesting, don't tell me don't block the road. And if I'm blocking the road to effect attention to my issue, and Timothy wants to come and drive over me, who is doing harm and who? Yeah. So those are some of the issues we have to look at. We're a society. In this society, each of us must recognize and respect the other's position and situation. That if someone is engaged in a peaceful protest and that protest results in some disruption, you don't go and barge through because you feel inconvenienced.
Yeah. And I would like to get Donald in the conversation here now. And of course, the protests lately cannot, and to only in your imagination can it be labeled as peaceful. But and many Indians, Donald, would say that whenever there's a conflict in Guyana, when there is this friction with the other communities, Indians tend to feel the brunt of the brutality. You know, whether it was in '97 and this was under the PUP also, whether even before '92 and '97, and of course 2001, and then of most recent, Indians, whether they're business people or they're citizen or the next village, they always have a issue with security, their personal security and their business security. You're an executive of the PPP. You're president at one time of the PPP. What do you say to Indians as it relates to their security, even at this time?
Well, you're right, and they are right about that. That is also a fact that whenever they have a protest in Guyana, Indians are the ones who suffered the most, and they're harassed and everything else. That's true. And there were some very disturbing features of this last protest on the West Coast Babees that actually scared me. A person who even though I was quite young, I lived through the 1960s. But there's a couple of things. What happened in the West Coast Babees was also a level of instigation when Granger and Harmon went to the West Babees. When they started to talk about us, this is the way we must do things, they were implying race. When Granger made his speech that we have to protect ourselves and us, and he was implying us and them in the whole argument. And that is what also ignited the whole issue on the West Babees, and the people became very hostile and started to do what they started to do with Indian people commuting on the road and so forth. And they began to see Indian people as the one who perpetuated this crime with no evidence, nothing at all, and started to attack people like that. But there were some other things that I read in the paper, some small things. I saw one person writing in the paper that she had this problem and had to walk out of their car and they were being molested and what have you, abused and so forth on the way. And they passed a house with some African Guyanese living, ordinary people. And they said, can we come in to hide, to protect ourselves from what is happening? I said, not in this house. Which tells you of that this whole matter is not a easy one in the sense that it has been an issue that the PNC has been pushing in the minds of their supporters all the time. I have an independent study here. I think the last time I was on your program, I spoke about it. There was a woman by the name of Jane Sillery who wrote a doctoral thesis on the U.S. intervention in British Guyana in the 1960s. But this is some of the things she wrote her thesis on the basis of documents that are being released from the State Department, and from the British office, Foreign Office, then the Colonial Office, but it doesn't exist anymore, but the Foreign Office. And this is what she said. I just want to quote a small part here for you. She said, African support for the PNC was mobilized through the strategy of reverse racism, of making a racial appeal by accusing their opponents of racialism. After 1957, the PNC set about galvanizing African Guyanese support by denouncing the PVP government as a Kuri or a rice government, which was alarming, which was abusing its position, etc., in the interest of the state. This is what he was saying. So the point I'm trying to make there, this is that for ordinary people to respond to an ordinary person looking for shelter in a period of hostility and taking the position, don't come in here, was a reflection of how the quality of leadership that Afro-Guyanese have been getting from the PNC all the time, and that they have been deliberately using race as a political instrument for political mobilization and organization. And and what Granger and Harman did when they went out there was testimony of that. I must, on the other hand, it's after having said that, I must also compliment what Volda Lawrence did. Although I think she also had other political motive. Of course, you know that she has been pushed aside. What it seems to me is happening, that Granger and Harman have used the APNU in order to push aside some people in the PNC who they don't like, and she is trying to reassert the PNC in this whole thing that is happening. The APNU, she doesn't want the APNU to totally absorb the PNC, and that is also probably what made her came out. I mean, I think what she did was laudable, and it helped tremendously. I believe that her statement had a very important impact on the West Berbice there. Whether it was purely humanitarian, I think a lot of it had to do with humanitarianism, but also I think some of it had her own political interests in doing what she did.
But with that, we'll take a quick break and we'll return with this conversation and maybe take a little turn and figure out how do we fix this? Because as you would have heard over the last half an hour or so, there is an issue of race in Guyana, whether the institutions agree on it or not. The people on the ground do believe that there is a race issue, and I think it's incumbent on leaders to address it. So let's take that quick break, and we'll be right back.
Cannot travel due to COVID? Then treat yourself or your loved one with a gift. Purchase it online, then let Travelspan Shop and Ship take care of the rest. Travelspan is now offering a shop and ship program to Guyana and Trinidad. Cheap rates plus tracking and multiple offices in Georgetown, West Coast Demerara, and Berbice to take care of your package. Treat yourself and ship your Christmas gifts early this year. In Guyana, call 269-0141, and in New York, call 347-238-2201. That's 269-0141 in Guyana and in New York 347-238-2201. Let TravelSpan and Globespan take care of your online shopping and shipping.
With the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, remember to wash your hands constantly and always wear your mask. A friendly reminder from Globespan 24x7 management and staff. Looking for a space to rent? We have space available for offices, apartments, and retails. We have 2 locations available on Lot 3A North Road, Georgetown, and Lot 55 South Public Road, Rose Hall Town. Contact us today for more information. You can contact 624-0692 or 337-4287.
All right, welcome back and good night. We are talking tonight about Guyana, a divided nation, and from all indications, based on our guest tonight, we seem that we do have a nation divided, and so we need to talk about fixing this. I think one of the big issue in Guyana is the acceptance of a divided nation, and if we are divided, I would love to hear from the 3 of you as to where is the line of division. I hear we are a divided nation. I hear we get different groups. I hear different parties, power centers, and so on. For us to really go and fix any problem, and James, you're an engineer, so you know you've got to deconstruct before you can construct something.
Political engineer too. Huh?
What is it in Guyana? And I want to start with Timothy. Where is the line of division? I find it that sometimes our politicians do not want to embrace and accept the actual division that's in Guyana. That's for you, Timothy.
Politicians don't want to accept and embrace the actual division that is happening in Guyana. That's an interesting statement. I sat here quietly listening to your 2 protagonists do their antagonism. You know, 28 years, as Donald said, one side demonstrated their lack of vision and ruined our economy. And then for another 23 years, we were second poorest to Haiti. And then for another 23 years, the others demonstrated their leadership. And if I remember right, we remained second poorest to Haiti. We're good at finger pointing. And I agree with the observation Donald made that in Guyana, there's no sense of superiority. I don't think any group will say we're better than them. We're all descended from slaves and indentured servants, but hearted, decent citizens. We justify our racism, our ethnic support of the political party of ours by casting the blame for the racism on the other side. So we don't say we're better, but we say those people over there are racist. And so many Guyanese are happy to say publicly, you hear them say, I genuinely believe those people more racial than us, our people. I believe those people more racial than us. So yes, you throw that stigma on the other side, and by doing so justify your own ethnic loyalty, not realizing that we're looking at 2 sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
So it has to start with introspection, because there's a reason that after 28 years and 23 years, we're second poorest to Haiti. There's a reason that we're so corrupt. There's a reason there's so many problems.
Yeah.
And if we can get through that and understand that the public who buy into that are just patsies for the 2 large ethnic-based parties.
Yeah.
maybe then we can move forward.
So James, like Timothy, do you believe that Guyana's division is along ethnic lines, Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese, that's where the division is, and that's where we need to start the conversation?
Well, firstly, we have to accept that there's a division, and we would need to determine the nature of the division. Now, you have been saying for the entire night there's an ethnic division, and or some people will say there's a political division whereby the two ethnic groups support two different political parties. And if the political parties behave differently, then the people will behave differently. Now, for instance, Timothy spoke about finger pointing. I am a strong believer that for this issue to be addressed frontally, leaders need to behave in a certain way. They need to, firstly, anyone who genuinely don't feel that the coming together of the races is a good thing for Guyana should step out of leadership in any way in the society. Now, Tim spoke about finger point.
James, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Because we weren't hearing you for a few seconds.
You hear me now?
Yes, we can. We can hear you now.
Okay. Because why would you go to some snippet from some obscure book to come to quote about how Afro-Guyanese behave and so on? And even worse, why would you cite some isolated incident about people trying to go into a house and what they were told, when in fact the effort should be, okay, to working towards a come together and a pull it together. Okay, I can relate my experience. My experience is I grew up in East Rhineville. At the end of the range where I grew up, there are some Indian people, the only Indian people that live in the street, the Poramals, and I know no one could have touched them. Okay, that is what I know about. Those are the kind of examples that a political leader should be trying to give. But everything that Donald cited, going way back to the 60s and what happened and these kinds of things, and Granger and Harmon, I did not move to mention here that no leader of the PNC or the AP and UAFC has made ethnic utterances from a political campaign stage during any political campaign. No, Donald don't say what. I mean, we just have to point you to Babu John, and you will know what happened there. Okay? So the point of the matter, the real point I want to make is this. There's a problem. And if we are going to solve the problem, we need to have the leadership behaving as if they want the problem to be solved. And the utterances have to be in keeping with that. Because the fact that you're leaders means you're leading people and people are following you. And they're going to take a cue from what you say and how you behave.
And Donald, what's your take on that? Do we have fundamentally an ethnic division in Guyana as it relates to everything? You were president. You were president in a country that has significant Indians and, of course, significant Africans, and there were issues, and there still is issues. I mean, we won't be speaking about this topic if we didn't have an issue. So, do you fundamentally believe that there's an ethnic issue that needs to be addressed?
Yes, you have to address ethnic issues. But what I am saying is that, in my view, The ethnic issues in our country are driven not by, if you look at as I mentioned before, if you look at countries in the world where you have racial and ethnic problems, there is always an underlying economic basis for it. South Africa, it was the exploitation of non-white for white people. The United States in the segregation period, the same thing. If you look in Guyana, there is no economic basis for racism. It is true that the majority of rich people in Guyana are Indians, but the vast majority of Indians are just as poor or poorer than the vast majority of Africans in our country. Therefore, in my mind, there is no economic basis for racism in Guyana. Our problem in Guyana is in our politics. It's in a subjective thing. And it's really started. It's not true that you hear some people, I think, over-theorize the question and say, well, this started when Indians arrived here in 1838. That's not true either. The ethnic problems in our society began in the 1950s. You had some things before that, when you had the League of Colored People and the British Guiana East Indian Association, but they were just middle-class people fighting for a little bit more crumbs. But fundamentally, that we don't have that deep-seated economic root to say that our problem is so insolvable. That is why I emphasized from the very beginning that leadership is important in this time, because I think the matter could be solved if you have the correct leadership on the issue. And I want to go back to that James is upset with me because I went back to show you that this is the modus operandi of the PNC. And I'm telling you this, another thing I know that Timothy always raises these issues about the two ethnic-based party, and he don't come up with any facts. He just make broad statements. He wants to say that he courses everybody or he praises everybody and so forth. You want to be everything to everybody. But I think we have to move away from that and see the reality. The reality is that this has been the PNC modus operandi all the time. From the time 1950, after they lost the 1957 elections, to today, their modus operandi has not changed. Has not changed. And they have continued in the same way. They were the ones who lent the sugar estates in the 1960s scab labor to start problems. They were the ones who the British used to send thugs into Indian areas to beat people up when they had the sugar strike in 1963 and 64. Mm-hmm. So, and I said this continues. If it wasn't for the responsible leadership of the PPP, we would have really had a terrible situation in our country. Yeah. That is the reality. That is the reality in our country, that the PPP has shown remarkable restraint and leadership in all the time trying to promote national unity and ethnic togetherness within our society. And that is the facts will bear that out. I want to recommend to Timothy that he should talk a little bit more to Ralph Ramkaran. He can probably give him some more history, because this kind of generality that he's making is not making a contribution to the solution to our problem. We have to see our problem as it is and deal with it. Mm-hmm. And that is why I fundamentally believe that the problems can be solved if we have two things. One, I believe we need to change our electoral system, because our electoral system as it stands encourages splitting up, and we need to have and we need to force political parties in this country to deal with national issues, to make national appeals, and not necessarily racial or religious or whatever other type of appeals that they want to make. And the first past the post system, with all of its shortcomings, because it has shortcomings, is the system that actually promotes that. Mm-hmm. Britain, that imposed the PR system on us, had a similar situation. The immorality of it all was when they imposed the PR system on us in 1964. They had exactly the same situation. Jamaica went to independence with exactly the same situation like us.
And if I can get Jonas into the conversation here again, Jonas, your party, well, a long recently ago, because it was quite a long time ago, but it was in March that you guys campaigned on a basis that these two ethnic parties have made Guyana what it is today, and that your party would have ushered in a new beginning, a new leadership. Can you explain what would be your parties if your parties would have won? What would be some of the fundamental changes that you would have see manifest itself?
Listening to, I don't know if you hear me very well, Stalin, but your voice has been deteriorating and breaking up. I'm only getting very piecemeal what you're saying.
Yours are breaking up too. So it could be the connection on your side.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Is it any better now?
What would your party be doing today, knowing that we have a conflict and you campaigned on a platform of working in an inclusive manner with all ethnicities?
Okay, I didn't hear the last part of your question, but I'm going to answer the part that I heard, and I'm going to respond to Donald. I was surprised by what he said. You see, he started by saying that he agrees with the concept that there shouldn't be finger pointing. And then he went on to say how terrible APNO and their leadership is, and how progressive and inclusive the PPP have been, and how many, villagers have been attacked by one side and that kind of thing. And then, having made all of those generalizations, he accused me of making generalizations. There's one thing that 95% of Guyanese will agree. 95% of Guyanese will agree and will argue convincingly and unequivocally that of the two large ethnic parties, one of them is racist, divisive, and corrupt. And the other one wants to lead for all Guyanese and is inclusive and embraces all races. 95% of Guyanese will agree to that. The thing is that what we've seen is that Guyana is split directly in half in terms of the view of which of those parties is racist and corrupt and which of those parties is inclusive and governs for all. And we've just heard Donald give one side, being Indo-Guyanese in the room. And we know that James feels the other side, being the Afro-Guyanese in the room. And my position is that both of those parties, by their very existence, being ethnically based, contribute to and perpetuate the problem that we have. Because we're seeing it in this room. We're seeing it in this forum, that one person is accusing the other group and saying, our leadership has been great, but those people, those thugs, go in and beat up people and do this and do that, finger pointing. And the other gentleman says, no, we mustn't finger point. But then he starts pointing fingers. And there we are back to square one. And we have leaders in this forum, leaders who are refusing to say, we are part of the problem. Because after 28 years and 23 years, we're second poorest to Haiti, and we still got violence at the drop of a hat, incited by our people. And we know we're ethnic based, and we know our support base is ethnic loyalty, and we're part of the problem. No,
so Timothy,
and then accuse me of generalities.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your question, Salim, in terms of what we can do.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry, I thought you wanted me to say
you've done a great job in describing the problem. I would love to hear what your party would have done, to kind of mitigate this conflict.
Guyana is in the wonderful position, the AFC proved it, that the demographic numbers are now so close that a third party with a modest base can have that swing vote in parliament. I want to give some examples of what we've seen happening recently. We've seen in central housing, the new government has announced, this is our CEO, this is the person who will run the company. And then the government announced, this is the board. This is the board of directors. We saw it with Gaisuko. The government announces, this is our CEO. And then the government announces, this is our board of directors. Now, the effect of that is that the only conclusion, rightly or wrongly, is that the individual who is appointed to run the company is a political appointee. I gave those two examples because the individual who was appointed in both cases is someone of competence, someone of quality. But that becomes irrelevant if he's appointed by the government. How can you appoint the CEO and then appoint the board? It's the board who appoints the CEO. So what should happen? The government would be entitled to appoint 2 members of the board, and the opposition should be entitled to appoint members of a swing vote on the board should be appointed by a third. So that when that board, and therefore that CEO will not be fired in 5 years if the government changes. Because if the government changes in 5 years, that same board will remain being 2 appointed by the government and 2 appointed by the large opposition, and the swing vote appointed by a third party. So you will have continuity of policies, you will have transparency in decision making, and you will have security in the knowledge that the officials that you have appointed to run Gaisuko, to run NISIL, to run Gaiwa, to run GPL, are not political appointees who you know will be thrown out. Civil aviation, who you know will be thrown out because they're seen to be political appointees. You have continuity of policy so that we don't have a hold-up of Payaro, because Payaro was negotiated by a government to the total exclusion of the opposition, so that when there's a change, all those political appointees thrown out and you have a whole new look at it. We need continuity and we need transparency, and that can be done. That can be done with a swing vote in Parliament, because the same Parliament created central housing. The same Parliament legislated for Gaiwa. The same Parliament can mandate that if you have a state-owned corporation, the opposition, whoever's the opposition, must have an equal say on that board and can numerically decide how to do it. And that is what we plan to do at this stage.
Yeah, it does bring a lot of fairness and transparency to government cooperation, but it still does not address the racial and ethnic issues that has plagued Guyana. And maybe that is a casualty of the reality. James, I want to get you into the conversation here again.
Well, I don't agree with you on that, but I will answer that at a different time.
James, I want to bring you back in, and you know, there is a image circulating on social media with an Indian guy and an Afro-Guyanese guy eating from one purine leaf, you know, so eating 7 curry together. And, you know, when you ask any Guyanese, are you racial? They say, no, my best friend is black, or my best friend is Pramal down the street, you know. We all have a black reason or an Indian reason not to be racist. Is that how we're going to fix Guyana's problem, by eating the same purine leaf and having a best friend who's black? I mean, it has to be deeper than that. I think that's just, as we say in Guyana, window dressing. I mean, what is your take, James, on how do we move fundamentally from where we are to where we ought to be, and not just focusing on eating purine leaf?
Well, a couple of things. We must understand that a certain type of relationship exists in society between people of different groups. People are friends. People are buddies. They hang together. They drink together. They have different coexist and to interact with each other. The first solution would be to ensure that we do not periodically rupture those relationships, okay? And we have to genuinely want to do that, to avoid it. And it must start with politicians agreeing that they will stop trying to score points by pointing to historical issues on racist or racial acts. Because when you do that,
but how do you prevent that institutionally? I mean, I can go down the road and tell a guy, don't beat up this guy because he's Indian, or don't pick on him because he's black. That's nice, but they don't have to listen to me. How do we do that institutionally? Because I think the problem with the conflict is not that we do it on a personal level. It has reached a level where our institutions are not built to accommodate these securities of either group.
Well, I wasn't speaking about individuals doing anything. I was saying that political leaders need to undertake not to do certain things. Okay, like some of the things Donald did on the show tonight. You know, he should say to himself, I'm not going to do that because it is not helping. Okay, and then we have to move from there to build certain structures in society where people will not believe that if this government is in or that government is out, my life is done, I'm destroyed, and so on. It must be checked.
You're freezing.
You there?
Hello?
James,
you freeze.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah. Oh. James, you there? Okay, you're back.
I'm here all the time.
Yeah, just quickly, just to bring the conversation back to reality, you said institutions and structures that needs to be in place. What would be an example of institutional structures that would help to mitigate the risk of ethnic conflict?
Well, a lot of these things are not direct, so I'm not going to be suggesting some ethnic commission or something of the sort. But some of the normal, okay, let's look, for instance, at the issue of what some people have been propagating and believe, that a political party in government is in a position to deliver economic largesse to its supporters. You can identify a man and make him rich, okay, by passing certain regulations and doing whatever they please, and there's nothing that can stop them from doing that. We need to change that. We need to let people know that if, regardless of who is in power, if I am a contractor and I want to go tender for a job, regardless of whether I stood in the political platform the last time and spoke against for the opposition, I can still get a contract. That is one thing that can happen.
If I can raise one thing with you specifically, among Indian community, they feel security is a big issue, right? And one of the things that some Indian leaders have been promoting and advocating for was the balancing of the army and police, which has not been the case for the last 50 years. Is that something you believe, James, that we need to address frontally, that to allay the fears of Indians? Let's look at the police, let's look at the army, let's look at its structures and how it's built, and kind of figure out how to get more Indians in there.
I agree. Let's look at the army. Let's look at the police. Let's look at the civil service. Let's look at the business sector. Let's look in all sectors of society where power accumulates and try to fix it. Hear what happens in Guyana when people talk. They behave as if the power in the society resides only with the police and the army and this public service, ignoring totally that a lot of power resides in the business sector. The society will be far more balanced if we make an effort to address all those things. And people who want to be involved, because listen, we can't balance the army or the police if, for instance, everyone don't want to go work for those meager salaries. Okay? But insofar that people want to do that, I think it should happen. And similarly, we should have a structure in Guyana where we address the issue of economic disparities. And it's a start for us with the government and how the government awards contracts. Because the government is the entity in the country that disperses the overwhelmingly large amount of money. And if the government can...
James went there again. So I want to get on to you, Donald, on a very similar question. Over the last few weeks, we, of course, over the last few decades, we've seen a few African organizations that have popped up to provide a voice and kind of a leadership to the Afro community. You have organizations like ACDA, you have a SAGE that was launched, I think, a few weeks back, or during this current conflict. And you have IPADA, another agency that takes care of African issues. Many Indians that I've spoken to feels that there is no organization that is addressing the fears or the concerns or even empathize to Indian concerns. What would you say to them? Is there a need for Indian representation by organizations?
I haven't studied it very closely like that. So I think my own view is that what we need in our society is to have genuine equal opportunity. And some of the things that people are talking about, they continue to repeat these things all the time as if nothing has changed. It is true what James was saying, that there was a period of time in our country and when government used to give out tenders to who they want to. That was under the PNC time. PPP instituted the bidding system. The bidding system. We established a complete bidding system where people would bid. You had two kinds of biddings. You had bidding with open bids, or you have things. We institute a system where the tender box is open in front of the media, the press, and where it is where at another opening, public opening, when it is awarded, who got the tender. PPP instituted that. That again was stopped over the last 5 years again, but PPP had introduced all of those things in our society and to have equal opportunity. But I think you're right. What is badly needed is equal opportunity. And you're quite right also that the Indian security concern must be taken into account. And this is an old thing. And the comrades said they don't want to hear history. But this was after the PNC came to government in 1965. They went to the International Union of Jurists or something like that, who made the recommendation that James just said about balancing the ethnic balances in the security forces in our country and so forth. James spoke about ethnic balances in the security. He agreed with that, but he also went on to say that you should balance in the business sector. But the government is what gives out these jobs in the different areas. The business sector is not the political party built the business sector. The business sector evolved totally differently. But I agree, all encouragement should be made, and PPP has been doing that when we were in government, to try to help other contractors to grow and not to. And I remember when I was sitting on the board of directors at Gaisuco at one period of time, We took deliberate positions sometimes when we look at one contractor winning all the bids, that even though they win the bids, we should give the bids, to give the job to someone else, because eventually Gaisuku would have found themselves with one monopoly contractor controlling everything, and we didn't want that. So a lot of these things have been practiced. Maybe it has not been announced enough. Maybe it has not talked about enough and promoted enough. But
so Donald, I
and
want to follow
secondly,
up one issue with you.
I want to make one
when
other
you were president,
I want to make one other issue that before you come to that, I'll answer you. When you come to that, there was a study done, I think somewhere about 2010 or so on and so forth. Or more than one study. One of it was done, I think I remember one clearly was headed by, the study was done by Clive Thomas, heading it on behalf of the IDB or some one of these organizations, which showed under the PPP the reduction of poverty in our society benefited more Afro-Guyanese than it benefited Indian Guyanese. From the point of view of, if you look at locations that at urban areas, you had a bigger reduction in poverty, absolute poverty, than in Indo-Guyanese area. So when there is a mistaken position to say that because the majority of big business people in our country are Indian Guyanese, that all Indians are rich. This is totally not so. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of Indians in our society are no better off, and as the studies show, probably even worse off than the average African.
So I wanted to follow up one thing you had mentioned. You did mention that you agreed with James that we need to look at the security sector, the army and police, and balancing it. As president, when you were president, the army and police makeup was the same as it is today, as it was, in 1990 and 1980 and so on. Did you make an effort to look at the security sector to provide?
There were two things that not only me did, but successive PPP governments did. I was there for 3.5 years. But what successive PPP government did. In the police, when we got into the government, the police was practically 95% African Guyanese. When we left government, it was about 70-30% Indian Guyanese and African Guyanese. That has probably changed back again. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the figures recently to speak about that. And what there was an emphasis in the PPP on was to try to professionalize the police force as far as possible, to professionalize the force, and to encourage. There were many things that blocked Indians from not going into the police force. Something with dietaries. Hindus don't eat meat, Muslims don't eat pork, and some of those things, cultural things, has to be fixed as well. So in order to try to encourage more and more Indians to go into the security forces. But the reality is the need for it is being shown every day, that it is needed very, very badly in our society. Right in the West Berbice there were incidents, you saw it on the television, where the people emptied 2 trucks with paddy, the people carried away the paddy, and they burned the trucks, and you saw the presence of the police and the army there. So there's a crying need indeed for a better balance. I'm not saying that you must have half and half or according to what portion of population, but that there needs to be a better balance, that the police force and the army must reflect the country as it stands with all its ethnicities, not only Africans and Indians, but Amerindians are a big set of people, and the minority, the mixtures and everything else, the Douglas and the Buffiandas, and everybody should be in there.
Yeah.
So that's to me, it's an important thing, and it was something that recognized in the 1960s. The PNC government in 1965 went with that study, and that was the recommendation that was made. And as far as business is concerned, yes, I think that we should have more. We should try as far as possible to use whatever leverage you have in your hands to develop more contractors, develop other business people, make credit more easily available for starting up business and so on and so forth. I strongly believe, unlike many other people who want to condemn everything that Barnum was trying to do, but I strongly believe that the co-op is a very important aspect is a very important mechanism that can be used to level up some of these disparities that still exist within the society.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things I think you need to examine more. But I just want to, in finally making my final point here, to just to respond to something Jonas has said. He said I was general. I was not general. Everything I spoke about was very specific. Um, um, and as far as Mark is concerned, you can't. Why in the name of God we study history if you want to say we shouldn't go back to history? History must be a guide to us. It must be a guide. Otherwise, we will continue to be making the same mistakes, and because we probably have not been learning the lessons of our own history, we continue to be in the mess that we're in today. So that's just the other comment I would like to make.
So I think in general, I think that there's a general agreement here that the ethnic issue needs to be addressed more now probably than ever. Because we definitely don't want to move forward in that same direction. And army and police and the economy and business opportunities for all sectors need to be addressed. I want to switch a little bit to the visit by Mike Pompeo tomorrow, and I think on Friday is the highest ranking American to be in Guyana for official state business. What is your take on it, Donald? I want to start with you first. What's your take on it? What is he coming to tell our Guyanese people in the midst of of budget debates as well as ethnic conflicts on the ground, and a lot of unresolved issues that Guyanese have, including the oil sector itself, a bad contract that we've inherited, and of course the local content policies and a whole host of issues. So what is your take on his visit, and what do you suppose Guyana will get out of it?
Well, first of all, let me say I have no more information than any of you, probably on the visit. I have absolutely no more information that are already in the media. I don't have any inside information to put it that way. But I think it's welcome. We have to recognize that the United States played an important role in the recent fight for democracy in our country to ensure that the elections represent the will of the people. And as the news itself said, the releases that have been made, that he said he's coming to celebrate the whole issue of democracy and so on and so forth. I suspect there will be other things that have been that would be discussed, but I don't have any more information about what else. If he's going to be discussing oil, if he's going to be discussing whatever other issues he's come to discuss, I don't have more information. But I think the fact that he's coming is a good thing. That the United States is the most powerful country in the world. We are in the same hemisphere, and the fact that he's going to make a trip here together with coming to Suriname and to Brazil and so forth, I would say it's a good thing.
James, what's your take on Pompeo's visit, Secretary of State?
Well, Donald said he's coming to celebrate. He's coming to celebrate coup.
You put it out, I think of it my book.
You put it in different words. You said he's coming to celebrate the victory of democracy.
You said he said. I said he said that, not me.
You are speaking from your prison. I am saying that he's coming to celebrate the coup, whereby they effectively remove the government and put in place a party of his choice. That's what I'm going to say. But like you, Donald, I don't have the facts as to why he's coming. There are a lot of speculations. He's coming to wring hands about Venezuela and using our territory to do stuff that most Ghanaians wouldn't want them to do. He is coming to address the issue of the role that Americans play and so on. He's coming to deal with the PVP as it relates to the little tit for tat they're having with ExxonMobil. So I don't know, but what I am worried about is that the visit should not be one that further promote deterioration in the political environment in Guyana. And we
you went again.
on issues in Guyana.
Yeah.
Because that will be very, very harmful to the country.
Timothy, Mike Pompeo's visit tomorrow and Friday. What do you know? If these guys don't know anything, do you know anything? And what's some of your expectations on his visit?
I know nothing at all, probably less than both of your other commentators about why he's coming and what he's coming for. I do know that internally for us, our leadership needs to have a 10-year plan for what we will be doing with oil money and how we'll be using it to improve infrastructure and improve our institutions. So that our traditional industries can thrive and prosper. Now, I hope that Pompeo's arrival is going to be used by our leadership to try to move that plan forward. We've demonstrated already that we are so deficient in areas of policing, in areas of social control, in areas of health, in areas of education. And I really hope that some discussions can be held on how we can move forward, strengthening institutions with a positive plan to use oil money to help Guyanese. The biggest threat to our two parties and to blind ethnic voting is the middle class. And the middle class needs, for the middle class to grow, there needs to be a good education system accessible by all. There needs to be better pay for our public servants and in the private sector, with priority for our nurses, our teachers, and our police. And everything needs to be directed in that direction. There needs to be better access to the interior, to farmlands, to mining areas, to timbering areas, roads, bridges. There needs to be a plan, and I hope that any discussion with this gentleman will involve that plan and its development.
Good, great. So we're about program time, and our topic tonight was a nation divided, how do we fix? So in 1 minute, each one of you, what would be one thing you believe we can fix to bring our society much closer, a more equitable society? And I'll start with you, Donald.
I don't think there's one thing we can look at. There's got to be a series of actions.
But one thing that you will look at.
There's no magic bullet. But for me, I think the important thing is looking at our electoral system. I think our electoral system should be one which encourages political parties to make national appeals, to compete with each other on our programs and our plans, and not to think that whatever I do, I could have racial support. And I believe that our PR system is a system that encourages or even promotes, in some extent, divisions in society. As we see now in Israel, they got a fourth election in 1 year and everything else and so forth. So I think if you ask me the one thing that if I had the power to do, that I pick up my finger, I would have changed the electoral system.
Yes, and that's definitely a good one. James, if there's one thing you could look at to help fix the ethnic divide that we have right now, what would that one thing be?
I would promote economic, remove economic disparities. I would, for instance, move for government to have affirmative action in terms of the contracts it awards, and do not move off from the position that whoever wins should get the contract. In many developed countries, you have a situation whereby for every contract that is awarded, the contractor must employ 20, 30, 40% of minorities or disadvantaged people, with women or ethnic minorities, to do some aspect of the work. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, government contract is the greatest source of money in the country, and that would play a very important role. A few years ago, we had a discussion with the PPP. We had an agreement at one meeting. I think we met with two public servants. They sent Kobe Frimpong and the guy from Ministry of Finance, the fat guy, I can't remember his name.
Balgobin.
We agreed on Balgobin, yes. We agreed to ensure that there is some kind of affirmative action. We went back the next day to form up and sign off. When we walk into the room in the office of the president, Frimpong nor Balgobin were not there. It was Roger Luncheon. And his position was them by saying, and he was saying Freedom House, that thing can't work. They can't take that thing to the supporters. And so therefore the whole thing was scuttled, and we never were able to address the issue of disparities in the tendering process. That is what I would do.
Good.
I thought sorry, but I thought they had actually projects that were agreed on and were implemented. They had this process where you I don't know anything that you mentioned there, but I know that we had an agreement when Desmond Hoyt was the opposition leader, and they had agreed on depressed areas initiative, where you did have projects that were implemented. So I don't know about what you're talking about there. I suspect it's the same thing, because that's all I know, the major thing that we had this decision on.
No. That's what I'm saying. Let me clarify. You were talking there, Donald, about the Depressed Communities Committee.
Right.
I sat on that committee with Odinga Lumumba. Okay? I am talking about the discussions we are having with the PPP government about contracting and how you will ensure that there is equity. There was a discussion, and Luncheon led the discussion after they turfed out Balgobin and Kobe Frimpong. So,
all right. Well, Timothy, you what would be one thing you believe we need to address, or you would want to fix to get the nation back together? Hello, Timothy.
This was supposed to be the central topic of your entire program tonight. Mm-hmm. It has not been. You've taken us on a rocky road here and there, and each time you've posed the question and I've sat, I deliberately didn't say much because I wanted to hear what two old guards were talking about. And every time I heard a response, the response turned on how good we are and how bad they are. So, first of all,
true. I didn't do that.
Having seen that,
yes.
We have to let the old guard go. Because I think the more we hear the poison that comes down from the previous generation, it impacts us, and they haven't learned. And if we learn from them, it goes on and it goes on. and we've had it for 60 years, and I hear the same poison. That it's the other side, it's not us, we're inclusive, they're divisive. So the first thing to me, we got to get rid of the old guard, let them go. And we have to get rid of the winner-take-all system so that the electoral battle is not an all-out, absolute, back-against-the-wall fight like we've seen, where you're in absolute terror that if the other side win, the other side gets all the contracts, the other side gets all the benefits, the friends and families, and you see the whole cleansing that we see every 5 years if there is a change of government. That system needs to change. The winner-take-all system needs to change. There needs to be transparency in each of those institutions where the purse strings are, and that must include personnel from the opposition, whoever's in opposition, being there to see what's happening.
Well, thank you guys very much. Thank you, Donald, thank you, James, and thank you, Timothy, for this engaging conversation. We were, as much as we can, speaking about a divided nation. And it's not an easy subject. The political wrestlers were at it for 60 years and could not deal with it. It ended up on the streets 2 weeks ago.
They thrive on it, and they continue to thrive on it. It's not that they couldn't deal with it. They benefit from it.
So we definitely,
you have your own,
we are definitely
your own narrative. Keep holding on to it. You're not dealing with facts.
Should not be. And we definitely move forward. And I think one of the things that all of our listeners, and we've had over 1,000 attendees at this show, one of the things I would encourage you, especially my Indian brothers and sisters, because I can speak to them. I'm an Indian, of course. I read your comments. I read all your feedback to James and Donald and everyone else, and beyond this show also. And much of what you're writing is bordering racism. We need to stop that. And of course, I'm not saying African Guyanese are not doing that. There's enough on that side, and the two put together creates a very volatile situation. So at least those who are tuning into this show every week, please watch your language. Your language determines your action. Your action determines how Guyana unfolds today, tomorrow, and into the future. So one of the things that you and I can do as non-leaders in Guyana, many of you are from the diaspora, many of you are in Guyana and probably facing the brunt of ethnic strife. Watch what you say on social media. Watch what you say to your brothers and sisters in your communities. But don't say nothing. I think you should be on social media as active as you are right now, but provide solutions. Don't talk to your African brothers and sisters who are in the same predicament as you are. Speak to your leaders, Indians. Speak to your PPP leaders who you've elected to address your concerns of security and so on. Africans can do the same. Speak to your leaders about solutions that you need to see so that the community, the Guyanese community can be together. So continue talking, but say the right things. I'm appalled as an Indian to see how many Indians write racist things, and I'm appalled as a Guyanese to see my fellow Afro-Guyanese writing racist things also. So we need to move beyond what these 140 characters and go and look at solutions. We are lazy people as a Guyanese people. We're lazy, so we write comments. We just diss each other on social media, and we say how McAllister is this and Donald is this and Timothy is this. That's the easiest and the laziest thing to do. What we need to do as Guyanese is start thinking and start doing the hard, heavy lifting by providing solution and guidance to our leaders. Our leaders, by and large, are in the same boat as we are. They are a casualty of our ethnic conflict over the past 50, 60 years. So with that, again, I want to say thank you to my guests. I want to say thank you, all of you who've tuned in tonight. And thank you to Globespan and and Nohar Singh for this the opportunity of this platform. Good night and God bless you.